So I want to say to the American people, we hear you. We will do right by you, and we will deliver. To the minority, I want to say this. We've never shied away from our disagreements, and I do not expect anyone to do so now. But however bright of a contrast that we draw between us, it must never blind us to the common ground that we share.
House Democrats pledge to seek common ground wherever we can, to forge a bipartisan path forward on job-creating infrastructure, to make taxes and foreign trade fair to American workers.
Well, with that, the 115th Congress went into session, but not before some drama. Today, you had a situation where the House Republicans reversed themselves. Last night, they went into closed session, and they decided to abandon this ethics, independent ethics group outside of the Congressional Ethics Committee, the Office of Congressional Ethics. Then Donald Trump on Twitter said this: with all that Congress has to work on, do they really have to make the weakening of the independent ethics watchdog, as unfair as it is, may be, their #1 act and priority? Focus on tax reform, health care, and so many other things of far greater importance. From the President-elect's Twitter feed, then the House Republicans abandoned it. Not everybody was happy about it, though.
This decision that was made by the House conference last night was an objective decision made upon the activities of the OCE that unjustly target members of Congress, and they should not be subjected to anonymous complaints that are acted upon by a body that then leaks that information out to the public, and they have to defend themselves in the public. That's unjust. I think we should have gone forward, and I'm going to push for the full disbandment and abolishment of the OCE.
So it was a rocky start. Let's bring in our panel. Editor-in-Chief of LifeZette, Laura Ingraham. Charles Lane, opinion writer for The Washington Post, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Okay, Laura, what about this rollout, you know, the abolishment of this office, and what the image looked like?
It was disastrous timing and messaging. For the first moment out the gate, they had this story out there. When I woke up and I saw this morning, I thought to myself, you've got to be kidding me. Donald Trump just won this startling victory based on draining the swamp. And once again, I think the substance on this aside, which I think Steve King has a point about the anonymous complaints and so forth, but just on the storytelling aspect of this, the story you're telling to the American people after Donald Trump wins this upset victory is that we're going to change the ethics office so that it's fairer to Congress. Now, he was absolutely right to come out as he did. I had Marsha Blackburn on my radio show at 10:30 this morning. She had a hard time defending it on timing and messaging. She agreed that the Republicans bungle these things time and again. Trump reads the pulse of the people, again, better than the rank-and-file Republican on Capitol Hill. And Paul Ryan actually voted against this, we understand. Yeah. But he wasn't able to turn enough votes on his side.
Both Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy, others were against it. But here's Bob Goodlatte, Chuck, who was the chairman of the committee, Judiciary. The House must have a rules package under which to operate and serve our constituents, and ultimately accepting the amendment from Majority Leader McCarthy was the only way to ensure the passage. That means making it go away. While I understand the need to do so, I am wholly disappointed that these important reforms to strengthen due process rights and the mission of the OCE did not move forward. Gross misrepresentation by opponents of my amendment and the media willing to go along with this agenda resulted in a flurry of misconceptions and unfounded claims about the true purpose of this amendment. He's trying to get into the weeds of defending this, but the bottom line, Chuck, is that the President-elect's Twitter account changed this outcome.
He seems to change quite a few things with tweets. I think there's a plant in Indiana that's going to have more people working at it because of some tweets. This is a really interesting unforced error because the history of this office goes back to the last time the Democrats took over the Congress back when George W. Bush was still president, and Nancy Pelosi had the slogan, "Drain the swamp." And in pursuit of the drain the swamp movement by the Democrats, they put in this office. As it developed, quite a few Democrats ran afoul of this. Mel Watt was heard to give some of the very same kinds of complaints you just heard Steve King doing.
And let me just interrupt you. There was bipartisan opposition to this.
Precisely my point. Mel Watt's a Democrat. And my point being that I don't understand how the Republicans couldn't find a way to maybe wait a little while and work with the Democrats on something in common, because there are quite a few Democrats who privately agree with what they've done, even while they're publicly making a lot of hay out of it right now.
Meantime, on the Senate side, the top Democrat there, Chuck Schumer, took to the floor for his first speech, talking about the president-elect's communication.
These issues are too important for mere words. Our challenges too entrenched for mere tweeting. Making America great again requires more than 140 characters per issue. With all due respect, America cannot afford a Twitter presidency.
Charles.
Sore loser. The tweets are working. I mean, if they weren't, they wouldn't be using them. As Chuck indicated, Trump has used it on North Korea. He's used it on the Ford, General Motors, on this issue in which he won within hours. And it works. It has a lot of effect, and he's not even in office. I think when he's in office, it'll be a little more problematic because people will be presuming policy out of this, and it's hard to be it's hard to be either detailed or specific enough in a tweet to actually make coherent policies.
Nuance is tough in 140 characters.
Yeah, and well, right now what Trump is doing is wielding a 2x4, and he certainly had to do it in the case of the House because these guys are mules. That was about the dumbest first step you could ever make, particularly because, as we just heard, this is an issue on which Democrats agree there are real problems with this office they wanted to abolish. The idea of a sort of procedure, giving people a chance to defend themselves openly, is really quite weak in this. It should be reformed. But you don't do it in the middle of the night. You don't do it as a first act, and you don't do it without Democratic support. Just plain stupid.
All right, Laura, I want to get to those tweets on GM. Today, the president-elect, General Motors is sending Mexican-made model of Chevy Cruze to U.S. car dealers tax-free across border, make in USA or pay big border tax. GM released a statement about that tweet saying General Motors manufactures the Chevy Cruze sedan in Lordstown, Ohio. All Chevy Cruze sedans sold in the U.S. are built in GM's assembly plant in Lordstown, Ohio. GM builds the Chevy Cruze hatchback for global markets in Mexico, with a small number sold in the U.S. So, I mean, the last line essentially confirms that some of those cars are made in Mexico. What about this specific company kind of going after specific issues on Twitter?
I think ultimately the better policy will be corporate tax reform, real regulatory reform that makes the environment here in the United States a lot more hospitable to innovation, job creation, for businesses to stay here. But right now he's in this interesting period, 17 days before inauguration. He already has, at least symbolically, some of these wins on the board. And PR-wise, I think they're really good for what he wants to do with a more populist approach to Republican policy. And also for these companies, they're feeling huge pressure from the public at large. I mean, you go on message boards, you go on Facebook, they were getting hammered on the Carrier air conditioning, and the car company. But the CEO today in various interviews said they're doing what's best for their company. It wasn't, I think he was trying to distance the Trump tweets as having much of an influence.
Yeah, well, Ford watches the tweets too, and they made an announcement on their own. You know, you saw Lockheed, you saw Boeing take a hit in stocks after these tweets. Chuck, last word on this.
It astonishes me that people are taking it in stride that a future president of the United States is going around threatening free enterprises with punishment for doing what is in their best interests and in the interests of their stockholders. The only thing more shocking is the spinelessness of the companies who knuckle under it.
It really can't go on. You can't really, in an economy with hundreds of millions, tens of millions of workers, you're getting these small gains here and there. It obviously is working and portraying the image of Trump as a guy who delivers on promises, who wants to protect the working people. But in the end, you can't govern this way. These are small pebbles in the pond, and it's got to be larger policy. It works as president-elect. I don't think it's something he can do as president.